Good day, everyone. What do you think lies beneath the waters of our coast? When we go to the beach, we usually just see the sand and the waves, but under the water, there's actually a whole hidden environment. This underwater extension of the land is what we call the continental shelf. But before we dive deeper into the details, let's take a moment to introduce my groupmates. First, we have Miss Ira Alexa Arbas. Next is me, Miss Kisha May El Pascual. And lastly, we have Mr. Mark Alan Mendoza. Now that you know the reporters, let's go back to the main topic, understanding the continental shelf itself. So, what is continental shelf?
So now, let's talk about continental shelf. What is continental shelf? The continental shelf is the submerged edge of a continent extending from the shoreline to about 200 meters deep. It has a gentle slope that can stretch for hundreds of kilometers before dropping into deeper oceans. Average depth at the shelf break is about 130 meters, but can vary from less than 20 meters to more than 900 meters. This variation depends on tectonics and the amount of sediment input. So, in other words, the continental shelf is the shallow area of the ocean right next to the land. It's actually a part of the continent, but it's underwater. This area is important because waves, tides, currents, and even living things like corals and shells help shapes and add materials to it. Since continental shelves are directly connected to shallow seas, the next step is to look at shallow seas more closely. Well, now let's focus on their different types and how they are classified.
Hello, I am Mark Alan Mendoza and now I will be presenting shallow seas. What are shallow seas? Shallow seas are less than 200 meters deep and the sunlight reaches the bottom of the ocean floor. They support rich marine life such as fishes, coral reefs, and such. They collect sediments and fossils which later form rocks and records of Earth's history. There are many important resources like oil, gas, and minerals formed in ancient shallow seas. Moving along, we have here the Neritic Zone. The Neritic Zone is the shallow part of the ocean, lying between the shoreline and the shelf break. This is the point where the seafloor suddenly drops steeply. It is in between that shoreline and the shelf break. The average depth of the shelf break is about 113 meters, but it can also go as shallow as 180 meters and also 915 meters. This environment mostly covers the continental shelf. The continental shelf is the gently sloping submerged of continents. The shelf and the Neritic Zone form in what we called the marginal or the pericontinental seas, such as the North Sea, Air, and the Yellow Sea.
And now, let's talk about the types of shallow seas. First, we have epicontinental or eperic sea. These are the broad, shallow seas that covers the interior of the continents. As you can see in the figure, since the eperic sea is surrounded by land on many sides, this means they receive sediments like sand, silt, clay, and organic materials from multiple areas. For example is the Western Interior Seaway that stretched from the Arctic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico during the Cretaceous period in North America. Next is pericontinental or marginal sea. These are the seas that lie along the edges of the continents resting on the continental shelf. As you can see in the figure, they are connected directly to the deep sea, and the water exchange with the ocean is much easier compared to epicontinental sea. So, they receive sediments mainly from one side, the land side, through rivers and coastal erosions. Example is the North Sea between the UK and Northern Europe, Yellow Sea between China and Korea, and Timor-Arafura Sea north of Australia.
So now, let's tackle about marine environments of the continental shelf. Marine environments of the continental shelf is divided into two, which are siliciclastic marine environment and carbonate marine environment. But first, let's focus in the siliciclastic marine environment. So, what is siliciclastic marine environment? Siliciclastic marine environments are ocean areas where sand, silt, and clay from land are deposited. These sediments settle mostly on continental shelves and shallow seas, and they are shaped by waves, tides, storms, and sea level changes. Unlike carbonate environments, they are formed mainly by physical processes rather than by organisms. Now, let's move on to the next slide.
In siliciclastic marine environments, we have three sub-environments, where in each sub-environment they discuss about the processes and conditions that control sediment deposition. We have inner shelf, middle shelf, and outer shelf. But let's dive first into the inner shelf. Inner shelf. The inner shelf is the shallowest part of the continental shelf, extending offshore to about 30 meters depth. It's dominated by tidal processes, wind-driven circulation, and storm wave activity. The boundaries between the inner, middle, and outer shelves are not sharp, and their positions can shift with sea level changes. During times of greatly lowered sea level, like during glacial low stands, the inner shelf and even parts of the middle shelf can be exposed as lands. So, in simple terms, this part of the ocean is just past the beach, where waves move the sand back and forth. You can see ripples and layers in the sand, and sometimes mud settles when it's calm. Strong waves or storms can push the sand into long underwater hills called ridges. Next, let's talk about the subzone of the inner shelf, which is the shore face. Subzone of inner shelf, shore face, part of the continental shelf from low tide mark to the depth affected by waves. Sediments are well-sorted sands. Often the waves ripple, cross-lamination, or horizontal layering. In slightly deeper areas, mud may appear during low wave energy periods. Sand ridges can form from storm currents or longshore drift, 5 to 15 meters deep, up to 10 meters high, stretching from tens of kilometers, usually oblique to the coastline. So this area goes from where the lowest tide reaches out to where the waves stop moving sand. Most of the sand here is the same size, and you can see little ripples and layers that show how the water moves. And when there's a big storm or strong currents, the sand can pile up into underwater hills called ridges, which can be really long and usually lean a little bit compared to the shoreline. Now, let's go to the middle shelf. Middle shelf. The middle shelf is the part of continental shelf where the water depth can increase of several tenths of meters. This area is typically a low-energy environment because it is often located below the depth at which normal, fair-weather waves have a significant effect on sediment movement. The middle shelf is the section of the continental shelf located between the shallow inner shelf and the deep outer shelf, where water is moderately deep and energy from waves and currents is lower than the inner shelf. In simple terms, the middle shelf is the quiet zone of the continental shelf, deep enough that everyday waves don't disturb it, allowing sediments to slowly settle and build up over time. Now, let's dive deeper into the outer shelf. Outer shelf. The outer shelf is the zone of highest energy within a continental shelf. This area is where semi-permanent ocean currents operate most effectively, and in some cases, these currents can be strong enough to transport sandy sediment. The outer shelf is the part of continental shelf closest to the continental slope. where the water is relatively deep, and the ocean currents are stronger enough to move sand and coarser sediments. It's the most dynamic and high-energy zone of the continental shelf. In simple terms, the outer shelf is the active and dropped zone of the continental shelf, far from the shore, where strong currents can move sand and shape the seabed. This figure shows the sub-environments of the Silicic-clastic marine environment, from the shore out to the deep ocean. Starting at the left, we have the beach and shore face, which are the shallowest parts closest to land. Moving seaward, the first zone is the inner shelf, which is shallow and influenced by waves and tides. Next is the middle shelf, which is deeper and calmer, where finer sediments like silt and clay tend to settle. Farther out is the outer shelf, the deepest part of the shelf, where stronger ocean currents can move sand and coarser materials. At the edge of the outer shelf is the shelf break, where the slope suddenly drops off into the deep ocean, forming the continental slope. This diagram helps us understand how water depth, energy, and sediment type change from the shore to the deep ocean. And now let's move on to the next slide.
The next topic that I will be explaining is about the shelf sediment transport and deposition. The meaning behind this is that sediments on the continental shelf come from rivers, waves, tides, and currents. Waves and storms move sand and gravel near the shore, while finer mud and silt settle farther out in deeper and calmer water. Some shelves, especially in the tropics, collect shells and corals instead of the river sediments. Next we have here is the wave-dominated shelves. The wave-dominated shelves is a steady supply of wave energy that keeps the sediment in constant motion. This leads to a well-sorted and well-rounded accumulation of sand. A sediment is transported in a back-and-forth motion, resulting in a symmetrical ripple marks and other structures and characteristic of oscillating flow. These wave-dominating shelves are typically found in open shelf areas. These faces oceans and are affected by ocean storms. This sediment is then transported to the sea by a combination of storm-enhanced ripple and currents, and also a down-dwelling currents. Here on slide 23, we have the illustration or diagram of wave-dominated shelf. This diagram or illustration shows a wave-dominant shelf, where waves and currents control how sediments are moved and deposited. Here near the coast, waves and longshore currents transport sand along the shoreline, while the storm-driven rip currents push some sediments out towards the deep water. The rivers and estuaries also bring in mud and silt, forming surface and bottom plumes. This spreads out across the shelf. Some storms are important because they are resuspended from materials, creating the Neploid flows. The Neploid flows, cloudy water, and layers that carry mud farther offshore. At the same time, wind-driven surface currents, downwelling, and geostrophic bottom flows redistribute sediment sideways and downward across the shelf. Overall, this illustration and or diagram shows the pattern is clear. Coarse sand and gravel remains near shore where energy level is high, while finer silts and mud settle in calmer and deeper parts of the shelf. This constant reworking makes wave-dominant shelves a very dynamic environment.
storm-dominated shelves are typically located along open continental margins with microtidal to mesotidal ranges. Here, sediments transport and deposition are strongly influenced by episodic storm events, which generate powerful oscillatory and combined flows that rework sediments across the shelf. These conditions often produce characteristic structures such as hummocky cross-stratification and event belts, while finer sediments accumulate in deeper, calmer settings. So this area is along the edges of the continent where the tides is not big. Big storms stir up the water and move the sand and mud around a lot. This makes special patterns in the sand, and in deeper, calmer spots, the finer mud can slowly settle down. This figure shows the types of sediments and structures that form in different kinds of continental shelves. Storm-dominated during transgression or sea level rise, and regression or sea level falls. In B, muds are common, sometimes with shells and glauconite, and they can be burrowed by organisms. Storms created storm-graded beds where sand settled in layers and hummocky cross-stratification, a structure formed by storm waves. Larger sand bodies with inclined surfaces appear, and the bottom, log gravels and sands mark high energy conditions. In C, as sea level falls, sandy deposits dominate. These sands often show inclined surfaces, troughs, and hummocky stratifications from storm waves. Parallel lamination and storm-graded beds appear within muddy sediments, while burrowed muds and laminated carbonaceous muds are found deeper at the base. Characteristics of a storm-dominated shallow marine succession. Shelf areas that were formerly below storm wave base experience storm effects and become part of the offshore transition zone. A storm-dominated shallow marine succession forms when constant sediment supply builds up the seabed and makes the water shallower. The shore face is characterized by sandy beds with symmetrical wave ripple lamination, horizontal stratification, and swally cross-stratification. And the top of the succession may be capped by four facies.
Next one is tide-dominated shelves. Tide-dominated shelves usually form in epicontinental seas or restricted shelf regions where tidal ranges are wide and tidal currents are strong. In these environments, the movement of sediments is mainly controlled by the regular back and forth tidal flows. This creates distinct features such as large tidal sand ridges, sand waves, and cross-bedded sands with reactivation surfaces. Although they are different in concept from storm-dominated shelves, in reality, many shelves shows the combined effects of both tides and storms, meaning their sedimentary structures often reflect the influence of multiple processes. So as you can see on the next slide, on shallow shelves, in areas with high tidal ranges, submerged tidal currents can transport sand to create a variety of bed forms, depending upon tidal strength and sediment supply. This ranges from mud-raped dunes to sand waves to longitudinal ribbons to erosional surfaces with increasing current velocity. Tidal bed forms can be tens of meters high and several kilometers wide where sand is abundant. Storm bed can be interbedded with tidal deposits and bioturbation can be well developed. So next slide is about shelves affected by intruding ocean currents. So some continental shelves are influenced by strong ocean currents like the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic or the Kuroshio current near Asia. These currents do not carry much new sediment from deep ocean, but their power is enough to shift and transport the sand gravel, and mud that are already sitting on the shelf. This movement creates striking seabed features such as sand ribbons, which look like long, stretched-out sand strips, large sand waves that looks like underwater dunes, and gravel patches.
Next, we have the shelf transport by density currents. This shelf transport by density currents happens when water masses of different densities move along the seafloor. Density differences are caused by variations in temperature, salinity, or by rivers adding fresh water and sediments. Heavier sediment-laden or laden water sinks and flows downslope, a bottom current, while lighter fresh water flows above as a surface plume. These bottom currents can carry sand, silt, and mud across the shelf and even down into deeper basins because they move along the seabed. The density currents are powerful agents of transport, reshaping the shelves and delivering large amounts of sediment far offshore. Here in the PowerPoint presentation, shelf transport by density currents are density currents form when water masses differ in density because of temperature, salinity, and suspended sediments, just like what I've explained earlier. These currents are often triggered during floods or storms, when rivers release muddy and sediment-rich water into the ocean. The heavier the water sinks and flows downslope along the seafloor, carrying sand and mud from shallow shelves into deeper ocean basins. Here we have on our next slide is the effects of sea level change on shelf transport. According to our research, the sea level is not constant. It rises and falls over geologic time due to glacial cycles, due to tectonic movements, and due to climate change. When the sea level falls, widespread areas of the shelf are exposed to erosion, and many more, and the sediments are carried offshore. When the sea level rises, the shorelines move inland, flooding coastal areas and allowing sediments to spread widely across the shelf. These many changes controls how the sand, mud, and gravel are transported, and this leaves distinct layers patterns in the geological record.
So now let's talk about biological activities on shelves. Continental shelves are very biologically active zones. Many organisms live in the sand and mud, including worms, mollusks, crabs, and other burrowing animals. As they feed and move, these organisms disturb and mix up the sediments. This mixing, called bioturbation, changes the texture and structure of sediments. Bioturbation is how organisms living in sediments changes their structures and appearance through burrowing, feeding, and moving. In muddy shelves, bioturbation is usually stronger because organisms can easily burrow through soft sediments. In sandy, high-energy shelves near the shore, fewer organisms survive, so the sediments mostly show physical structures like ripples or cross-bedding caused by waves and currents. So, moving on to the next slide, we will tackle about ancient siliciclastic shelf sediments. We can study ancient shelves by looking at their preserved sediments in rocks. They often show special sedimentary structures that give us clues about the processes that shape them. One important example is Hamaki cross stratification, which forms in shallow water. When powerful storm waves stir the seafloor, these structures is very common in Asian shelf deposit. By identifying these features, geologists can reconstruct Asian siliciclastic shelf environments and understand how they developed in Earth's past.
Here we have the shallow sandy seas. The shallow sandy seas is a heterogeneous clastic shelves depend on sediment supply from continents, with most materials delivered at river mouths. The waves, tides, and storms redistribute these sediment, making the shelves mainly sand and mud dominated. This is where sediment supply is low. Warm seas develop carbonated shelves, while cooler seas became sediment-starved, deepening over time. These shallow sandy seas are part of the ocean near the coast, where the water is not very deep and the seafloor is mostly made of sand. Waves also and tides and also currents keep the sand moving, forming features like sandbars, shoals, and beaches. Since sunlight can reach the bottom, the seas are full of life, including seagrasses, shellfish, fish, coral reefs, and more. The sand often comes from rivers, eroded rocks along the shore, or older deposits that waves keep reworking. These areas are always changing as sand is constantly being washed away. The sand is also being carried around, and the sand are also deposited again by moving water.
And now, let's talk about carbonated marine environments. So, what is carbonated shelf environment? According to Boggs, 1992, a carbonate shelf environment is a type of continental shelf where carbonate sediments dominate the seabed instead of siliciclastic deposits. These environments are most common in clear, shallow, tropical to subtropical seas at low latitudes, but they can also be found in cooler waters at higher latitudes where sediments mainly consist of shell remains. Well-known examples of carbonate shelf environments include Florida Bay, Western Australia, the Bahama Platform, and Pacific atolls and tropical regions, as well as the Southern Australian Shelf, parts of the Northwest European Shelf, and the Orkney Shelf in temperate regions. Non-marine carbonates may also form in lakes, caves, soils, and dunes, but these are less significant in the overall geologic record. So in simple terms, carbonate shelf is a part of ocean floor where most of the sand and muds comes from things like shells and coral instead of regular sands from rivers. This usually happen in clear, shallow, warm seas like around Florida, the Bahamas, or Western Australia. You can also find them in cooler places, but there they mostly come from shells. Sometimes, carbonates can even form in lakes, caves, and sand dunes, but that's less common. Now, let's move on to the next slide. Carbonate shelf or non-reef environments. Carbonate shelf or non-reef environments are depositional settings where carbonate sediments accumulate mainly on broad, shallow platforms rather than within the reef system. These platforms can be located along cratonic margins, within intracratonic basins, across offshore banks, or on positive features of wide shelves. Carbonate environments also extend into marginal marine settings like beaches, lagoons, and tidal flats. Geologists recognized four main types of modern carbonate shelves or platforms. These are the rimmed carbonate platforms, unrimmed or open shelf carbonate platforms, carbonate ramps, and isolated carbonate platforms. So, in the next slide, we will discuss these four main types of modern carbonate shelves or platforms.
So now, let's talk about the four main types of modern carbonate shelves or platforms. The first one is rimmed carbonate platforms. These have a distinct reef or sand shoal rim along the margin, which absorb wave energy and often creates a protected low-energy lagoon behind it. The second one is unrimmed or open shelf platforms. These lack a marginal barrier, so water circulation is open. This results in higher energy beaches and shoals, especially common in cool water environments or in cooler water environments. So the third one is carbonate ramps. These are gently sloping unrimmed shelves where shallow water deposits gradually pass into deeper water phases. Unlike rimmed platforms, there is no steep break in slope or reef trend. The last one is isolated carbonate platforms. These are standalone shallow water platforms surrounded by deep water. They are typically free of clastic sediments, making them distinct from continental shelf settings.
Next, we have here the ancient carbonate shelf succession. An ancient carbonate shelf succession is a sequence of layered rocks that formed in warm shallow seas where most sediments came from marine organisms instead of rivers, instead of corals, instead of algae, instead of shells, and also tiny creatures. This build up limestones and dolomites over time. Near the shore, tidal flats, and lagoons. This left mud-rich deposits while wave zones and shoals formed sandy and limestones. At the shelf edge, reefs grew and in deeper areas, quiet lime muds settled. As the sea levels rose and fell, these environments shifted. This creates repeating layers. Geologists study these successions to understand past seas and to locate resources like oil, like gas, and water. Here at our presentation, the ancient carbonate shelf successions are thick layered deposits of carbonate sediments like limestone, dolomite that accumulated in shallow marine environments on continental shelves or platforms, just like what I've explained earlier. They reflect long-term depositional process controlled by sea level. These sediments supply storms, tidal activities, and biological productivity. According to our research in Boggs 2012 and other geologists, these successions often show shallowing upward cycles, meaning that the sediments record a progressive shift from deeper to shallow water conditions over time. On the next slide is the examples of ancient carbonate shelf successions. We have here the isolated platforms, that we have the early to middle Triassic carbonates and Dolomite Alps from northern Italy. Here are the deposits, and it is a flat-lying succession up to 800 meters thick with cyclic peritidal carbonates and teepee structures. And according to Bossellini 1991, it is similar to modern Bahama banks. It is deposited under moderately low energy in shallow marine conditions, and beside it is the illustration for this example.
Another examples of ancient carbonate shelf succession is rimmed shelves. Rimmed shelves are shallow carbonate platforms marked by a prominent reef margin that protects the inner shelf. A classic example is the Permian carbonates of the Delaware Basin in Texas and New Mexico. Encircled by the Capitan Reef, these deposits include lagunal, mudstones, waxstones, evaporites, reef moons, and shoal carbonates, representing a complete rimmed shelf system.
Another example of ancient carbonate shelf successions is the Epiric platforms. Example is the widespread in the late Precambrian, China, Cambro-Ordovician, North America, Middle East, Mississippian, Triassic-Jurassic, Western Europe, Permian and Tertiary, Middle East. These broad, shallow platforms are influenced by storm, tides, and sea level changes. Successions often shallowing upward cycles with lime mudstone, waxstones, grainstones, stromatolites, and evaporites, reflecting repeated flooding and progradation of the platform. So, epiric platforms are the big, shallow areas of the ocean that happened a long time ago in different parts of the world. Waves, tides, and storms moved sand and mud around these platforms, and the sea level kept going up and down. This made layers of different materials like soft lime mud, rocks with shells, and even salt, showing how the water slowly covered and then left the area again and again. And now, we will talk about facies shift with sea level changes and Walter's law of successions of facies. Facies shift with sea level changes and Walter's law of succession facies. So, what is facies? The characteristics of a rock that tells us its environment, like beach, sand, offshore mud, or reef limestone. Each facies represents a specific depositional setting. So, facies simply means the type of sediment rock that shows the environment it was formed in. For example, the sandy facies can mean a beach, muddy facies can mean offshore. Next, facies shift with sea level changes. Sea level rise or progression, deep water facies cover shallower ones. So, kapag daw tumaas ang dagat, umaabot siya papasok sa lupa. Yung mud from deeper water, natatakpan yung dating beach sand. Then, sea level fall or regression, shallower water facies cover deep ones. Kapag naman daw bumaba ang dagat, umaatras yung tubig. Yung beach sand lumalabas at tinatapakan yung offshore mud. Then, these shifts show up as vertical changes in rock layers. So, sa mga bato, nakikita natin ito bilang layers na magkakapatong, minsan sand sa ilalim, tapos mud sa ibabaw, or baliktad. Depende kung mataas or high tide or low tide ang dagat. Example ng layers is this: kapag rising ang sea, sand, mud, and carbonate. While kapag low tide, mud, sand, and gravel. Now, let's talk about the Walter's law of succession of facies. So, according to Walters, the vertical order of facies in rocks reflects the horizontal arrangement of environments in the past. Facies that were once side by side will appear stacked on top of each other. So, Walters says the vertical sequence of rocks matches the way environments were once arranged side by side. If a beach was next to offshore, then in the rock record, beach sand will be below offshore mud. So, in simple terms, facies shift with sea level change explain why different sediments or facies stack on top of each other. Rising or falling sea level moves environments sideways or landward or seaward, and these movements is recorded vertically in the rocks, while Walter's law of succession of facies explain how to read the vertical stacking. It tells us that the order of facies we see in rock layer matches the way environments were arranged side by side in the past. Now, let's move on into the shallow marine carbonate and evaporite carbonate. So, what is shallow marine carbonate? Shallow marine carbonates are carbonate sediments that form mainly in warm, shallow, clear seas where conditions favor the production of calcium carbonate by organisms, such as the corals, algae, and mollusks. Shallow marine carbonates, as described by Nichols, are sediments that form in warm, shallow seas where sunlight can easily reach the seafloor. Shallow marine carbonates are usually found or located 30 degrees at the equator of the Earth. So, shallow marine carbonates are the sediments that form in warm, clear, shallow seas where lots of sunlight reaches the seafloor. Tiny sea creatures like corals, shells, and algae make calcium carbonate, which builds up as a sand and mud. These places are usually found near the equator or in tropical parts of the Earth. And now, let's move on to the next slide.
So, in this slide, we will talk about carbonate ramps and platforms. Carbonate ramps and platforms are carbonate depositional systems that develop in shallow marine environments dominated by carbonate sedimentation. They are typically found in warm, clear seas where organisms such as corals, algae, and shellfish produce carbonate sediments. Unlike clastic shelves, these are classified as non-clastic shelves following Nichols' classification. Studying them is important because they preserve evidence of past sea level changes, climate condition, and the state of marine ecosystems, making them valuable records in Earth's history.
On this slide, we have the carbonate ramps and rim shelves. For our carbonate ramps, it is a gentle, continuous slope from the shoreline down to the deeper water, and it looks like and it processes like a ramp. It has no sharp breaks between shallow water and deep areas. All energies decreases gradually from the shore onto the offshore. And the most common deposits of the carbonate ramps are the tidal flats, lagoons, shoals, open marine carbonates, and more. And for the rim shelves is a giant seawall built by reefs. The reef at the edge takes the wave energy, while calm, shallow water environments like lagoons and flats form behind it. For the rim or the reef rim barrier, it is a rigid framework of coral, algae, and other organisms developed at the shelf margin. So this is the difference between the carbonate ramp and rim shelves. Here on the next slide shows three types of carbonated shelves: a carbonate ramp, a non-rimmed shelf, and a rimmed shelf. A carbonate ramp has a gentle slope with no sharp edge. It is near shore areas have lagoons and sandy shoals, while offshore areas contain finer muds as shown in the figure. A non-rimmed shelf, on the other hand, is a flat and lacks a reef rim. Inner parts of it are sandy and outer parts are muddier, and the sediments may slide downslope into deeper waters. And for the last one is the rim shelf. The rim shelf has a clear reef barrier. Behind it is a quiet lagoon collect mud, while the reef margin builds up solid limestones. This broken reef debris falls down the slope into the basin, where fine carbonate mud settles. These three types of carbonate shelves reflects different energy and deposition settings.
This slide highlights two key shallow marine carbonates environments: sand shoals and reefs. Sand shoals form in a shallow, high-energy water where waves, tides, and currents deposit carbonate sands made of ooids, pyrroids, and skeletal fragments. They appear as sandbanks, bars, or ridges and represents grain-dominated carbonate systems. Unlike reefs, they do not have a rigid framework. Reefs, on the other hand, are built by reef-building organisms such as corals, algae, and sponges. They create a rigid, wave-resistant structure found at shelf's margin, acting as a natural barriers against wave energy. Reefs also serve as biodiversity hotspots, providing habitats for a wide range of marine life. Together, sand shoals and reefs shows how different processes shape carbonates deposition in shallow marine environments. So, this next slide, we can see reefal deposits and shoal deposits. So, reefal and shoal deposits are two important types of carbonate depositional environments, but they differ in how they form and what structures they create. So, as we have said on the last slide, reefal deposits are formed by reef-building organisms such as corals, algae, and sponges. These build rigid, wave-resistant frameworks made of skeletal material like bound stones and frame stones. So, reefs usually occur at shelf margins in high-energy zones and provide a habitat for a wide variety of marine life. So, in contrast, shoal deposits are formed from carbonate sands made of ooids, pyrroids, and skeletal fragments, like we have said also on the last slide. Unlike reefs, shoals lacks a rigid framework and instead appear as a sandbanks, bars, or ridges in lagoons, ramps, or behind reefs. They represent a grain-dominated carbonate deposition. They develop in shallow, high-energy areas influenced by waves, tides, and currents. This slide compares evaporatic lagoons and restricted basins, two environments where evaporite deposits can form. Evaporatic lagoons are small, shallow, coastal water bodies that usually sit behind reefs or barriers. They have limited water exchange with the open sea, so when evaporation is strong, they produce thin, localized evaporites deposits. On the other hand, restricted basins are much larger, semi-enclosed or inland seas. They often have a very restricted or no direct connection to the open ocean because of their size and longer-term isolation. Evaporation leads to the formation of thick, widespread evaporate successions. In short, lagoons create a small-scale, local evaporites, while restricted basins generate a large-scale and extensive evaporites deposits.
For this slide, we are tackling about non-clastic shelves. So what is non-clastic shelves? Non-clastic shelves are shallow marine areas where sediments come mostly from organisms and chemical processes. It is not from eroded rocks, that's why carbonate reefs and evaporite basins are the main deposits there. And on the other side of the presentation, here we have the meaning of carbonates and evaporites. For the carbonates form, and it is from organisms like corals, algae, mollusks, and forams, while the evaporites is formed from chemical precipitation due to evaporation. And these both form in clear, warm, shallow seas with low clastic input, and that is the explanation for the non-clastic shelves in our presentation.
So, before we end this lesson, let's highlight the stratigraphy of the continental shelf environment. So, as you can see here in the figure, the yellow sand layers or sandstone represents the high energy shallow water when the shoreline moved seaward or in the form of regression. Then the blue mud layers or mudstone or shale represents the quieter, deeper water when sea level rose and the shoreline moved landward or transgression. The green carbonate layer shows times when little sand or mud came in, so carbonates like limestone or rips could grow. So, the stratigraphy of the continental shelf is made of repeated layers of sand, mud, and carbonates. These layers record sea level rise and fall, amount of sediment supply, and the processes of wave, storms, tides, and organisms that shape the seafloor. So, this is the references where we get the informations of our PowerPoint presentation. Principle of Sedimentology and Stratigraphy of Boggs, 2006, and Sedimentology and Stratigraphy of Nichols, 2009. And that's all. I hope you understand and learn something new. Thank you for listening and watching this video.